to Sew with Monty. This is the part 2 of our torso drape block. And what I've done, we made the measurements and did the drape block in the last video, and now I have it pinned together. The first thing I've done is pin my front and back darts. And I've made my pins go in the downward direction. This is safer if you're working on a live person so that you don't stick them. It's easier to get stuck if the pins are going upward. And you want to try to get your lines right on top of each other. This one needs a little adjusting on the pin. So front and back darts are pinned, and I've also pinned the shoulders. And on the shoulders I've run my pins toward the outward direction so that they're not sticking into the neck. Now, this being said, I'm using steel head pins. And the reason I'm doing that instead of sewing pins with the glass ball on it is because they're not as intrusive in the drape part of this when I put it on the form. So if I have to overlap anything that's pinned, I won't have those little balls interfering with the seams. I've done both shoulders. I've done all the darts, the 2 back darts, the 2 front darts, and I've pinned from the waistline down to the hem. So I've lined up my waistline points and I've pinned downward to the hem. So now that this pinning on the drape block is done, let's take it to the form and I'll show you how to fine-tune the fit. So now we have the drape block on the form. And you can see by doing this I'm a lot closer to fitting this form than if I had just taken a piece of fabric, cut it a little bit extra size and started draping from scratch. This is a lot better way, especially on a live person, because it's hard to drape on a live person because they move, they breathe, and it takes a lot longer to get a raw piece of fabric into the shape you need. So this gives you a little jump forward so that when you get on a person, you're not on there so long that they get impatient or tired or your drape gets distorted. Now let's analyze what we have here. The first thing I'm seeing on this drape block is that my hip is too tight. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to ease out the hip. I'm going to give myself a ½ inch on the double on each side, and I'm going to go to 0 at the waist point because my waist at this point is definitely plentiful enough. So I'm just going to taper back to 0 at this moment. Now we'll come back and readjust this waist, but we need to let this hip out so that we can let everything fall into place and we have an accurate read of our drape. So we're going to let this out a ½ inch first. And then after we do this, we're going to go up to the shoulder area because high point shoulder is really the beginning of this entire drape. And if we don't have this right, then nothing beyond that point is going to be right. So once we release this so that everything can fall in place, we're going to go up here and address this. Now, things I'm noticing, first of all, my shoulder slope is too square on both sides. See, I've got a little too much there. But another thing I'm noticing is my front neck is sticking out. See how it sticks out here? Now, your obvious thing would be to just taper it here, but that's not the right thing to do. What is happening here, my necks are fighting. My front neck is too large for my back neck, and this happens a lot of times where the back neck needs to be slightly larger than the front neck. So I'm going to release my shoulder here, and I'm going to repin my shoulder so that the center front lies flat, and I realign the shoulder. See how when I do this, let me get a pin in here. See how the back now is closer to the neck and the front's laying out? So I'm going to take that and then I'm going to smooth it out and I'm going to pin off the shoulder slope until it's accurate to the form. And you would do this the same on a person until it's accurate to their shape. So see, I've got a little bit less of a square shoulder there. See how it's tapered down? And my back neck is smaller than my front neck. So I'm going to do that on both sides. This is very critical. You want to be very precise about this shoulder, and high point shoulder especially, because if it's not right, the entire garment is not going to fit right. So I want to smooth this out and make sure that my front neck is laying flat and my back and front high point shoulder are compatible. And it'll make all the difference in the way the rest of this garment feels and looks on the body. So high point shoulder is your key here. So now I have this laying very flat in here. See how smooth it is across the shoulder? So that is very important. Now the next part of this, I'm going to come back in and I want to analyze where my darts are. If you notice, my waistline is dropping below the waistline on the form. This happens sometimes when you start doing the actual drape. We'll adjust that as we go. So what I'm going to do is take the dart suppression, and I'm going to take the pin out of the original dart suppression, and I'm going to raise it up just a little bit here and realign my pins to coordinate with this. Like that. See, now this will be my waist suppression at this point. So let me get these done, and then I'm going to go ahead and take it in a little bit more up in the midriff area until 0 at my dart point. Now I intentionally back my dart point off 1 inch from the apex because I don't want it right on top of the apex. So that's already a much better dart positioning now. Now, I'm going to do both sides of this, but I'm going to come over here first and try to get my suppression in the back and then the waist seam. So in the back, my darts are out a little bit far here, and that happens sometimes. So what you can do is just use the same dart line you originally drew. The key to having a good dart is that your fold line is straight. Don't let it get curved because that will cause a twisted dart, and when you sew it, it won't lay properly. So I want to move it over though, because it's a little bit too far out. So what I'm going to do is open this up and then find a new center line that is parallel to the line I just drew when I was doing my drape block. So I'm going to come over about 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to redraw or repin my back dart. So and I'm going to stay parallel to the center back line. And I just want to pin it down through here. I think I'm going to raise this dart point up a little bit. It's a little bit low. And then pin my dart. Start with the suppression and then go up to roughly, I'm going to go up just a little bit higher because I can raise my armhole just a wee bit higher than what I originally planned to do. And I'm going to repin this dart in. Now I'll mimic this on the other side, but when I make my actual pattern, I'm only going to use one side of this drape. The pinning on the other side is just to make sure I don't pull too much or get it too tight. And then when I'm finished, I'll pick the side I want to use, and that'll be the side I use as my drape. So you can see this is a much better fitting dart here, and the alignment is much better on the body. It's more over the crest of the hip. So this dart will be moved over, and this dart will be corrected. And then I want to find my actual waist suppression here, right on the side seam. So this is my waist suppression, which means my high hip shape has to come in a little bit more than I have. So I'm going to reshape my hip contour through the high hip as such. See? Now already this side's looking much better than I have over on the other side. So let me go ahead and fix the other side to match this one, and then I'll take you to the next part of the drape. Alright, so now I have my side hip to the waist pinned, and very close to similar on both sides, so as close as I can get pinning it. My dart suppression is corrected. It's deeper and a little bit higher, and the back darts are a little bit more inward here. Now it's time to do some trimming and clipping so we can see what we really have. The neck and shoulders laying really nice. I love the smoothness up here. That's very, very important. So I'm going to clip now into my waist suppression. So my waist suppression is right here, and you want to make sure you're right into it. You want to release the fabric here, because releasing this fabric changes everything. As you can see, just as I clip this, it's already changing its shape. Clip your darts just like this so that they release as well. That's going to change the whole shape of how this hangs. So clipping into the waistline and all the darts. We want to get this released a little bit so that we can see how it's truly hanging. And see, that alone is going to change a lot. See how much nicer it's laying right now? Plus it allows me to see if I need to get any tighter in places along through here. So this all looks pretty good. I might could go just a little bit closer in my front suppression of my dart here. Just going to go just a little bit more. Now I'm not going to go too much because I still have to do the side seams. And I don't want to pull so far away that I don't have enough to do my side seams. So that's looking really good. The thing I'm looking for, there's no drag lines down here. It's nice and clean up here. Everything's laying close to the form. There's no gapping in the neckline. It's all looking pretty good right now. Now let's talk about how to develop this armhole in this area. Now, it's different than a male figure, what I'm about to do. If it's a male figure, you're not going to have to add a dart in this area. But because it's a female figure, we're going to have to add a side dart. The first thing you want to do is come along the crest of your armhole here. And right about mid-armhole, you want to pinch a tuck that goes toward the apex, and you want to pin 1/8 on the double. This is armhole ease, and this allows, when you put a sleeve in, for movement here and comfort. So this 1/8 inch ease right here is very important. And then you smooth down, and you're going to come around, bringing your back and front together here. Now remember, you want to add about a 1/4 inch ease here. So when I pin this, I want to pin it about a 1/4 inch away from my actual seam. So if my actual seam is here, I'm going to be a 1/4 inch away. Now almost immediately at this point, you want to come up with the fabric that's down below and down with the fabric that's up above, and smooth the front out so that you're directing a dart toward the apex again. Now if you're having trouble with that apex, you see that little X there, you want to make sure that you direct it toward that apex. So if you need to mark an X or pin it, that's totally fine. But see how I've smoothed this up, and then I'm turning this down so that this side stays nice and smooth. That's what I'm looking for. This creates my dart and where it needs to be. So I'm going to pin it down. And then once I have it pinned, I can continue joining my side seam together. So I just pin that, and then remember, keep about it from the form. If you hold it snug to the form, come out a 1/4 inch for your ease. Now if you have trouble doing this on the form, finding that 1/4 inch ease, go ahead and pin it tight to the form, and then adjust that 1/4 inch ease. After you've got it pinned tight, you can draw a line and then repin it on that line. And I'm going to come down right in line with my waist suppression here. I'm going to bring this one in just a little bit more. Adjusting is fine. If you need to adjust it, that's perfectly fine. That's what this is all about. And I think my waist suppression might be just a little bit low now that I've clipped. So I'm going to bring it up just a tiny bit. I prefer to have my waist suppression slightly higher than my waist instead of slightly lower. So you can see that where I'm holding this is slightly higher than where I actually originally clipped. But see how much nicer this looks now that we've got it pinned like this? So we'll mimic the same pinning on the other side, and then I'll show you how to trim. So I'm pretty happy with my pinning now. I've got my side seam pinned, and I like the contour. I'm always keeping in mind that I don't want any drag lines or any tension. So everything's looking good. I've got my 1/8 inch on the double in the ease of the armhole. Shoulder slope is good. Necks aren't fighting. Everything's laying flat. So you want to just inspect all of your pinning. So you've got a little bit of a bump there. So I'm just going to repin this dart just slightly so I get rid of that. And then once we have it all pinned the way we like, we haven't done the armhole yet, but we're going to get rid of some of this extra fabric. So on the side seam, I'm going to trim it back down to approximately a 1/2 inch beyond my pinning so I can see better what kind of shape. Now there's 2 reasons you want to do this trimming. First of all this extra fabric could distort the drape and not let it hang properly. So you want to get rid of the extra fabric so that when you are draping, you can see better what it's going to look like. See, just releasing that extra fabric on that seam allowance, you can already see how much smoother it's laying. So I want to do that on both sides. I'm going to do it at the shoulders, and then we're going to talk about the armhole. Get out of the way here. I keep getting in front of the camera. So let me get this off of here. And you really want to do this. Don't leave the extra fabric because it does change the fit. See, you can see already just by releasing that how much better it lays. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to take a different color marker. I'm going to use a red. Now you can use chalk here, but I want to find my corrected waist suppression. That's very important. Now I've already decided I'm going to use this side. I don't need to mark both sides. So this will be the side that I'm going to use to create my pattern. So the right side of the form is my pattern. Now, if you notice, the waist is changing its shape. See how it's almost on line here? But as I get forward, it drops here. That's because when we measured, we went across the apex. So it dropped down a little bit. And that's all right. We just want the accurate waist, no matter where it lays on our form. So I've got the red waistline corrected in here. And I want to just make sure I draw through my waist suppression on my dart. Now the dart. How I'm going to mark the dart is I'm going to do vertical lines across through here, just perpendicular to the fold line. When I open this up, there will be a gap between these lines, and that will give me my dart. This will be the dart point right here, not the apex, but the dart point. Now, this dart is sitting just slightly higher. If I get to my form or my flat pattern and I see I'm not a fan of where this is headed, I'll lower it a little bit. Now, sometimes it's not a bad thing if this dart is slightly higher. But I'll assess that when I get down to making my flat pattern. This one will end right here, an inch below the apex. This is ease. This will not be part of, you don't need to mark it, it's not a dart, it's going to actually be ease in the armhole. But I do want to mark my corrected shoulder here. And I also want to mark where my front and back neckline connect, right there. Now, I like where my back neckline arrives at my high point shoulder. I don't like here, it's too low. So I'm going to fill it in plus 1/4 inch here, so it's just a little bit higher here. I don't need it right on the seam, but I definitely don't want it this low. Now here, I'm going to bring it out till it lines up with the edge of my back neck. Back neck will rule here. In the front, I'm going to bring it up 3/8 of an inch. This way it's a little bit closer to the neckline. It doesn't have to be right on the seam. I'm shooting for being about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. So my shoulder is done, my dart is done, and my waist is done. Now it's time to address this armhole. Now inside here, if you're on a form, this plate represents the arm's eye. And this means from the armpit to the shoulder point. If you didn't have your arm on there, that's what you're dealing with. Now if you're on a human being, it would be the armpit and the shoulder point. Those are the two things you want to be paying attention to. Now I don't want to run my shoulder point right to the arm's eye. I'm going to come up here. A lot of forms will have a little crest on them. Mine's about 1/4 inch away. And you can kind of feel it in. There's a little crest there. Now at the base of the armpit here, I want to be down 1 inch. This is the actual armhole depth. I don't want my armhole all the way up into my armpit. That's very uncomfortable, so you want at least a 1 inch ease here. Okay, so you want this 1 inch. So this is going to be my armhole right here. So as I come around through here, I'm going to gradually go away from the plate and line myself up with that 1 inch drop underneath the arm. Same in the back. I want to start right at the same point. So I'm going to come over here and mark it. Now, if you using these markers on your form, they will bleed through if you're not careful. So you may want to use tailor's chalk for this operation so that you don't ruin your form. And you can always just adjust it once you've got it in there. Dotted line. Remember how, I mean a dash line. You want to use a dash line because you don't want to get a solid line in here real quick, because you might want to adjust it a little bit, and that's hard to do if you've already drawn a solid line. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to cut this out on this actual dash line so I can see my real armhole. So I'll take this pin out for temporary, and I'm just going to cut on this dash line right here. I like to use these small scissors to do this with because I have a little bit more control when I'm draping. And I'm just going to go all the way around through here. I'm just going to ignore the ease in the front armhole. That will come later. And just want to get this one off of here. And then I'm going to do the back. And then I'll repin it. And we'll trim the shoulder so that it doesn't interfere with the fit of the armhole. And then we'll see what we have. So now you can see a much nicer armhole. So I'm going to take this pin, put it back in here. I'm going to release the ease in my armhole. See, that's for a sleeve. You need that. So don't make it fit too tight unless you're making a sleeveless garment. But for the torso, we're going to accommodate for a sleeve. That way we have the option. It's easy to take this out. You can slash and spread this out of here and put it into the dart anytime you want. But having it in there helps you get your armhole accommodating a sleeve. So that's my armhole right there. And this is my new shoulder seam. Sides marked, my darts marked. Now it's time to take my pen and mark all my darts and my side seam. So I'm going to go on each side. I'm going to do again a dashed line here. And I want to make sure I get that dart through my seam. And I'm just going to make a dashed line across my pins so I know where everything is going down the side seam. Now I'm not marking both, I don't need both, I just need the selected side, the one I prefer the fit of, and then I will have what I need to go to paper. So I'm just going to mark both sides of this. Take your time, don't do this in a hurry. It's actually really fun, especially if you just take your time and get into it and enjoy it. It's really fascinating when you get to the finished muslin and you sew up your basic torso and you see what you've done just from draping. And then when you start making beautiful garments off that torso, you really can get excited. So I've marked both sides of my darts. Oh, not the front one. Let's mark that one too. So we're going to mark both sides of this dart right in the pin line. And then we have one last thing we're going to do to this muslin. And then we'll take it off the form and we'll go back to the table and we'll start building our pattern. So let me get my long ruler. I want to show you the last thing we're going to do and then we'll take it back to the table. So now we have our muslin marked. The side seams are trimmed, the darts clipped, everything's marked. And now it's time to put in the HBL, or the horizontal balance line, because we've had an adjustment in this waist. The balance has changed. Now when you do this, especially if you're working on someone, make sure that you have the person turn in place and don't go around them with the ruler like this. The reason being, your floor may be slightly uneven, the way you hold your ruler could change, and you could distort your HBL line. It doesn't matter where you put it. I'm going to try to start with the 8 right here. So what I do is I turn my figure and I just keep marking the 8, leaving my ruler in a stationary position. That way I know I haven't leaned my ruler and got it at a distorted angle. I'm not on a floor that's uneven and causing this to be an uneven line because of the floor not being level. So I just have to do the half. The half I've selected to use as my pattern. And I'm just going to go around through here. And I'm going to come to center back where the center back fold line would be. And that will be the end of my, this is my HBL, my horizontal balance line. So it's referred to in the industry if you're talking to someone about it and you want them to do something about the balance of the garment, you'll tell them check the HBL. Because that's how important this line is, just like high point shoulder is called HPS. So they're very important factors here, HPS and HBL. Okay, so we have everything marked. This is going to be my pattern side. I'm just going to give it a check. And I'm going to take it back to the table and show you how to make your pattern.